Lionel, is that you?
There, I think I got it.
Wow.
So yeah,
does it have enhanced driver technology?
This has advanced. What does it have? Advanced driver technology or something. That's what Mazda was flogging there for a while.
Yeah.
A translation. We just have a fancy dashboard.
Yes.
But
and seven cup holders.
And 7 cup holders. When my son Peter was selling Hyundais, the latest Sonata came with 12 cup holders. And he says, "Who has 12 drinks?"
Yeah, no kidding.
You're driving around with 10. And now, so I quickly replied to him, "Well, I can imagine you driving around with 10 cans of open Red Bull. So there you go." Yeah, you don't want to be looking in his car.
Yeah, it's kind of scary.
Yeah, it's very scary.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Okay, so Bruce, tonight, do you remember a long time? Have you ever heard of that guy, Lance Mindheim?
Yes. He does a lot of fantastic stuff, particularly shelf layouts. He's had some great articles in MR and Model Railroad Planning and some other publications. And I believe he still does custom track planning. I think it's the Shelf Layout Company, maybe.
Yep, and we just released an interview with Tim Klomoski, who got to know Lance because Tim was a fireman in Miami, and Tim was taking photos for him on, we'll have to ask Lance, but some particular thing that Lance was doing. You know what I would say about Lance?
What would you say about Lance?
I would say he's a model railroader of note.
I would say that's a good description, yes.
And a prolific author.
Yes. And a great model, because the stuff he models is spot on. It's very super realistic.
Yes. And he has a new book out. I don't know who, somewhere on Facebook, I saw that he had a new book out called Model Railroading as Art.
Wow.
And
that's what it is.
Yeah. And it intrigued me.
Yeah.
So then I thought, I feel like I'm almost, I'm not sure if Lance would ever, acknowledge me if we were in a crowd, but I feel like we're very close to being good acquaintances.
There you go.
So
I was just thinking, Model Railroading as Art. Of course, Frank Elson wrote the great series in Model Railroader in 1944 called The Art of Model Railroading, a 6-parter, which was a great bit on the hobby.
That's true. It's true. So I sent Lance an email. He responded immediately, and he said he'd love to be on the show again. So I thought this would make
excellent
for a great follow-up interview.
I'm sure it would.
So would you mind getting him out of the green room?
I'll run down the hall and get him.
Yeah, run down.
Hey, Lance, come on out, buddy. We're ready for you in the studio.
Well, I'll wake up from my nap. I have to say, Lionel, I would definitely acknowledge you in a crowd.
Oh, okay. Excellent.
I'm not saying that if I stay on this upward track, I mean, I can't guarantee it for the future, but as of now.
As of now, yeah.
And I appreciate the promotion to modeler of note.
Oh, absolutely. How many articles? Do you know off the top of your head how many articles you've had published?
Probably 70, 75, I guess.
Holy mackerel. And are they across a varying array of publications, or are they mostly Kalmbach?
Mostly Kalmbach, although I've done some for MRH and had a good time working with Stephen Priest at RMC. I did 3 or 4 articles with him. He was great to work with.
Okay, cool. And so, and you have your own website. You go to lancemindheim.com. Is it Mindheim? Am I saying it correctly?
You are one of the few that has gotten it correct. Yes, that is correct.
Wow. Do I get some sort
free
of
beer, free pizza? I will answer to anything.
And what is your relationship with Tim Klomoski? Because I don't remember it exactly, but you needed photos of something in Miami, and he was a fireman not too far away.
Right. It's Tom.
Tom, I knew. I knew that.
Uh,
I was just testing you.
yeah, Tom's grew to be one of my best friends. It was kind of funny. I had started this website a long time ago, at least 10 years ago, where I was just documenting some of my Miami layouts, and out of the blue, I didn't even know him. He sent me a note offering some pictures, and we corresponded back and forth. And I flew down there, we met, we did some rail fanning, and then the friendship kind of grew beyond railroading. So that's the beauty of our hobby. I mean, the friendships that you get out of it, but it just kind of came out of nowhere.
Yeah, that is the beauty of the hobby. Actually, I think that's why it will never. I don't think we'll ever lose it or anything because it's the camaraderie between people.
I agree.
So somewhere recently, I can't remember specifically, but I saw that you had a new book and it was called. I have lots of questions for you because it's been a while. It's been a couple of years since we talked to you. But what caught my eye was you have a new book called "Model Railroading as Art." As art.
Yeah, that was a mother to write too. But yeah, I got it out. I got it out in December. So and that's published on Amazon.com. So it's self-published. So if you just put the book title in Amazon, it'll pop up.
So self, what would we call it? Entrepreneurs such as yourself that writes books specifically about a particular subject. Now you don't have to try to find a publisher. Now you can go to Amazon and it can be self-published.
Yeah, they are very good to work with. The thing you do not get with self-publishing is the marketing, but I had the blog, so that's kind of worked out. But it is a viable way to go. They're very easy to work with.
And so do they, I guess we don't know the behind-the-scenes situation, but basically people order it and they buy it and the book just shows up.
Yeah, it's a new technology that's pretty amazing. It's called print on demand. And the nice thing about it is there's no waste. I mean, if somebody wants to order one of my books, they just go into Amazon, they buy it, and it's just
Boom.
printed right there. And I've had guys in Germany that get them a couple days later. So it's not, the nice thing is they're not just sitting there in a warehouse somewhere. So I mean, even outside of model railroading, it's a great technology.
And how many books have you written that are on your website?
7,
Wow.
8, 7, I think.
Wow. And when did you start doing that? Like,
I guess it was about 7 or 8 years ago, and then I took a long break, and then the last year and a half I've been working on this one. So.
And how did you get the idea? What was it that inspired you for this book?
Oh, for this book?
Yeah.
That's a good. What was it? What the heck made me go down that rabbit hole?
I don't know. I asked you first.
If he doesn't know, we could be in trouble.
Yeah, we could guess. We can guess, Bruce, and then you know what? Let's you and I guess and see if
I'm giving you a hard time. I'm giving you a hard time.
No.
I don't know if you've ever been to the Art Institute of Chicago, but they have. If you haven't, or any of your listeners have not, you really owe it yourself to go and visit the Thorn Rooms, which were done in the 30s, which are these magnificent models and dioramas of homes, and they just bring it to an entirely new level. And I started thinking about it. And thousands and thousands of people go to this exhibit, and they're just models. And if the Thorn Rooms can be considered as art, and being one of the premier museums in the United States, why can't art hobby be viewed the same way? It's more of a mindset than an approach, I think.
And what is this place? What is it called? The Thorn
Rooms, Thorne, and it's in the Art Institute of Chicago.
Thorn Room.
It's a pretty Thorn Rooms.
Yeah.
Because you go in there, it's a pretty big gallery. I don't know how many of these displays they have. 50, 60 maybe.
Wow. And this is just somebody that was building homes, and they built these 3D models basically to.
I can't remember. I think there was a wealthy woman back in the 30s, and I don't know where she got the idea. I don't recall. There's a whole history of them that was printed in a book. And then she contracted a couple modelers One of them was this guy Kupchak, whose son is still doing it.
Okay.
I think he's in his 70s. But if you ever have a chance, Google it. I mean, it's
Yeah,
just unbelievable.
I just did Google it, and it is unbelievable. You're exactly right, and that's again, that's the for me. I will get into this part. Bruce has heard it 1,000 times, but first, I want to mostly talk about this book because I haven't had an opportunity to get it yet. But I'm fascinated. I'm not fascinated. I'm pleased that you have written this book because it seems like you're answering or stating an opinion that I think a lot of people have.
And getting back to your original question, the reason this book was so hard to write is you're trying to take this objective, something that's pleasing to look at, and explain how to do it, which is pretty darn hard. And I would look at some of the premier layouts of all time. You look at Mike Confalone and Tom Johnson, and you study them, and it's what is it that sets them apart? And it's not that easy to understand. And I would spend hours just trying to figure out what makes these snap off the page, and that's really what I try to dig into in the book.
Okay, I like that. Yeah, because I can remember when I started writing for Model Railroad, I wanted to. I would look at the photos from Alan McClellan and Tony Custer, and I'd think, I want my pictures to jump off the page. They seemed to be able to create a scene that was almost so realistic and almost like you could step into it. It's such
exactly.
And so, all right. So did you kind of sit bolt upright in bed one night and go, I'm going to try to explain the art of model railroading as an art, or how did you? Where did
well,
you?
I had the idea, but I did not bolt upright in terms of writing the book because I really didn't know how to go about doing it. I started a book called Attainable Realism, or How to Make Your Models Look or Layouts Look More Realistic, and I got about 50 pages into that, and it just kind of stalled, and I never finished it. And then over time, I just gradually gelled the way of, kind of approaching it more from the artistic point of view. So it had a couple of bumps and starts before it launched.
Right, and were you able to use some of what you those first 50 pages? Were you able to use some of that in this book, kind of thing?
Maybe 10 or 15.
Really, eh?
Yeah, not that many. You had to start over from scratch.
Yeah. So, okay, so basically, the book is about describing what is it that, like you say, Mike Confalone or Tom Johnson, whose stuff is spectacular. I mean, you look, Tom Johnson has a very small, has a shelf layout, basically, but I mean, they're very narrow. But I mean, the pictures are just, you kind of look at it and you're like, how does he do that?
And what I came down to, and the thing with the book is, I didn't want the reader to just get buried in minutia. I really wanted them to understand, throughout the book what the main points were and keep it simple. And what I came down to, Lionel, is in terms of what made these guys stand out is scene composition, color treatment, how you handle the backdrops, and being really aware of not shooting yourself in the foot. In other words, not getting almost to the finish line and then sticking something in there that just, kind of detracts from what you work so hard to do. So it really comes down to color treatment, composition. Backdrops are very unique to what we do, and if you don't handle them carefully, you can get in a world of trouble in a hurry. So those are really the three areas that I get into. And when I wrote the book, I got about a third of the way into it and realized I just really didn't have the art background to really do it justice, so I stopped. And in Washington, D.C., they have this fantastic program put on by the Smithsonian called the Smithsonian Associates, which is essentially night school. And so I went to night school, took a class on color theory and a couple composition classes, which were an enormous help, and took those ideas and then brought those into the fold. So the book is largely organized by my notes from those classes that I took.
Okay, and because you live in the Washington area, basically.
Yes.
All right. And so how many pages? So do you have a lot of photographs of other layouts or just primarily stuff that you've done?
It's all my stuff just to make it faster.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
there's a lot of graphics in there also. So it's mostly my stuff.
Okay, a lot of a lot is there some instruction in the book? Is it like instruction plus the explanation is model railroading is art? Is that kind of what it is?
Yes, I wanted the reader to be able to apply it. I didn't want it to be, too artsy fartsy up in the clouds type stuff. Number one, because wasn't smart enough to get to that level anyway. But yes, it is kind of a how-to book.
Okay,
Also.
cool, cool. So all right, so it's a how-to book, but all right. I'm very excited about that. I'm very excited about the work you do. So how long to remind everybody is that you're still a professional layout builder, am I correct?
Yeah, coming up on 20 years. Hard to believe.
Wow. So for 20 years all you've done for a living is to professionally build model railroads.
That is correct. And I would tell anybody that wants to do this that don't go buying don't start thinking about buying real estate in Boca Raton or Santa Monica. It's model railroading is not a get rich quick industry, but I'm fortunate to do what I love and pay the rent.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's not a get rich quick scheme, but it's certainly, if done properly for you, done properly, it's been a proper way to make a living.
Yes, it has.
All right, cool.
So what would be, because I know you've done layout design as well, but if somebody was interested in contracting you to build a layout, what would the procedures be besides sending you an email, I want to have you build me a layout, and then you reply with?
The first step would be, it's very similar to having an addition put on your home. The first step is to have a design done, which doesn't obligate the person to have me build it, but you can't build it without the design. So I send out a design contract. We go back and forth and get that done. I try to get a sense for their budget so the design isn't something that they can't afford. And then I put together a proposal with a couple options, and then we do we have a build contract, which is very similar to, if you had a home edition done. And
right. So the design process, I would assume, would include, what John Armstrong's famous Gibbons and Druthers. So you have an idea what they're looking for in the layout and space available, and then you take it from there.
Exactly. I have a questionnaire which a lot of times indirectly I'm asking the same question 2 or 3 times to see if I get the same answer. And I'll start out with a rough concept saying, given what you said you want to do, this is the general shape and the direction I'm leaning. And I've been at it long enough, generally 9 out of 10 times I'm heading in the right area. I send in the right direction. They send me their notes, and it's a lot of fun. It's, a back and forth collaboration. We're working off of books and maps and kind of teaming up. And then between the two of us, we, 2 or 3 go-arounds usually have it nailed down.
So it sounds like the design process is completely separate from the build. Like the person will hire you to design a layout. And then have you ever got to a point where, or I see here on your website, you do layout design. So you are willing to be hired out to design layouts as well as build them.
Yeah, absolutely. I do probably more design in terms of volume, or in terms of number of contracts. I do a lot more design only than construction.
Oh, okay. That is cool. I should be better at this because I feel like like I'm looking at your blog now and I'm just, so what was the layout that you and Tom Klomoski were working on?
We've never worked on one together. We're friends. He's got his and I've got mine. We're not.
Right. But he was taking pictures for you.
I still have that. The downtown spur layout. The downtown spur is a CSX branch line in downtown Miami, and Tom worked for the fire department. He's a great photographer, and he's prolific. So every morning on the way to work, he would just take these incredible shots and send them to me. But that was the downtown spur layout, which I still have.
Okay, and did you build that for a series of articles or something?
I did do articles on it, but I just like you build yours. I just for my own fun.
Oh, okay, so you built yourself a layout just because that's what
Yeah,
you.
I'm not one of those, and you may not be either. They always say, well, you don't want to make your hobby your business or you'll lose interest, and that never was the case for me. My hobby helps the business, and the business exposes me to people that want things I wouldn't have done on my own. So I pick up you pick up different skills.
So how did you decide one day to start being a professional layout builder? What was the impetus that where you just went, okay, I'm going to do this?
Well, I went in with my eyes wide open. I mean, I was an insurance agent for 20 years, and at 20 years they offer you a buyout. So about 2 years before that, I had read an article in MR. I think it was Cardiff. I don't believe he's in business anymore. I think he's retired, where they just explained the business. So I really thought about it, for a year or so before um, jumping into it. I had a background in construction management, so the article was really the impetus, I think.
Okay, and did you have some layouts to build when you started, or did you kind of go into it and you kind of sat there and twiddled your thumbs for a while, or how did
No,
you
I
get?
did an overlap. I knew with my insurance practice, I knew I had the ability or the option to retire. But before I did that, 2 years ahead of time, I made sure this was up and running, because if it had not taken off, I would have just stayed with what I was doing.
Right, and do you have a separate shop where you do this?
Yeah, commercial real estate in Washington is really expensive, and I started. I mean, even for a dump out in Beltsville. Um, And I started thinking about it, and it was cheaper just to build a 2.5 car garage fully outfitted with drywall and climate control and the
Right,
whole deal. So, I've got a 500 square foot garage. So if I ever sell the house, it looks normal, and I don't have some ratty shed in the backyard.
right, yeah, okay. And so, how many layouts have you built in 20 years?
Phew, I should know the answer to that, because it depends. Sometimes I'll do one that takes me a year and a half, and I can only do one at a time. So I'm guessing 40, 50.
Holy mackerel! You built 40, or even if you said 40, so that would be like two on average 2 years. You've built 40 layouts professionally over the last 20 years.
That's my guess. Right now, I'm kind of hitting a point where I'm doing. Um, I've been doing a number of smaller ones, so I'm to the point where I'm doing 3 or 4 a year. Sometimes you get a big one where you do, like I said, that takes a year, year and a half to do.
Somebody should have a podcast and ask you a lot of questions because I think you probably would have a lot of information about model railroading. How have you seen it change over the last 20 years? Has there been a noticeable change for you?
I would say a couple surprises. I think people are starting to wake up and realize that you don't need a massive layout in order to enjoy the hobby. Um, I don't know if it's because of my Monon article on the N scale layout, but I'm seeing a lot of guys that are well off financially that have decent sized homes with enough room that are still just doing N scale. So I don't know if that's a trend or not.
Right. So the one thing you may have noticed is that people are leaning towards they don't feel like they have to have the basement filled with layout. That's a lot of people. I have had that thought myself. Gee, and okay, we're going to get into my favorite part, and I'm sure you've listened to every one of our podcasts and some of them twice.
Yeah, I mean, wherever I go on a trip, I mean, I turn off the radio, I listen to them.
Really, or are you just kidding me?
Good answer.
Yeah,
I've got the sheet with all the answers that you emailed.
There you go. That a boy.
Excellent. There you go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the check will be in the mail.
No, but just I'll just jump in. Your comment about how people are seen to be coming about to realize they don't need a monster layout to enjoy themselves in a hobby, I think is spot on, because we've talked to others who are finally, for years and years, it's unless you have a 30 by 30 foot basement full of model railroad, it's not worth your effort in the hobby. But more and more people now are doing the smaller things. They're seeing more of that in the hobby press, and others like Marty McGurk.
Yeah.
he's downsized his layout to something more manageable. So, I think you're right on.
Slightly downsized.
Well, yeah, slightly.
Did he tell you that he downsized it?
Well, yes, sort of. but anyway,
I designed his layout, so I can comment on this one. I designed it. It's
okay.
maybe a 5% downsize.
Yeah.
Well, didn't the layout he had before, he had it double deck and he took the top deck off it?
That I vaguely remember.
Yeah.
I have to ask him that. So
Yeah.
Marty's a good friend of mine. So.
Marty's a good guy. Marty's one of my favorite people in the hobby.
But going back to the smaller layouts, I think that's a positive trend because it just opens it up to more people.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of guys, they'll have a home with maybe a 12 by 12 or 15 by 15 very nice room. And even though they have a full basement, they just don't want to deal with everything that entails. So it's not even a question of not having the space. They just like having something they can deal with that's in a really comfortable room, a fully finished upstairs room as opposed to the basement.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you find it harder to design a smaller layout or easier? Like,
it's not easier because it's smaller because you have more constraints. So you have to kind of think it through a little bit. So I would say they're about the same because with the bigger ones you have more room to fiddle with the small. So that makes them a little bit easier. The smaller ones, there's not as much volume, but you still have a lot of constraints.
So here's an interesting question. Do you feel like a lot of the layouts that you've just done plans for, have you seen any of those built or at least started to be built?
Surprisingly, I think most of these guys actually do because, as part of the design contract, I mean, this isn't the reason, but I keep in touch with all these guys and most of them do. And with the design contract, I give them lifetime support if they have any construction problems so they can call me while they're building it. I'm guessing 80 to 90% build them.
Wow.
And that's one thing I really try to hammer home is because I build the layouts, I know there's things that are really a pain that may look easy on paper, but when you get down to it are not, is I really try to make these things buildable so that the guy can, get it up and running quickly. And sometimes they get some pushback and I'll push back on them saying, if you go this route, I mean, this is going to be a mother to build and you're going to regret it later. So when they hire me, I've got to have their best interests in mind, which doesn't always mean telling them what they want to hear, but the end result is something that hopefully will go together quickly and easily.
That's kind of a neat idea. That's kind of a neat thought that you design them as buildable. You understand how difficult it is to build a model railroad. So when you hire somebody, you want something completed, or you want them to feel like it's doable and not get buried alive before they get in too far.
We have fun with these. I mean, most of my clients end up being friends and we like to joke around, but when they'll ask me a question, I'll always say, well, do you want me to agree with you or do you want me to tell you the truth and save you from yourself?
Yeah, well, good.
Yeah.
Now, we're talking about small layouts. Do most of your clients prefer a smaller layout, or do you?
I would say
what kind of percentage are we talking? Is 60, 70% like small and the rest are somewhat larger?
It's pretty subjective. I would say a typical layout is probably 15 by 20.
Mm-hmm.
That's the most common. That's the range I see the most often. The one that's in the shop now is 12 by 20, which is pretty typical.
So there's one.
And that'd be shelf along the walls, or with some.
It follows the wall with the center peninsula if we have the room.
So not a huge, but a manageable layout, and they should be able to build it.
Right.
And do you do any of the cars and locomotives, or that's all left up to the person?
That's up to them.
Right.
They do.
Okay.
They've asked, but I won't do that now.
All right. And so you have one in the shop that's roughly, what'd you say, 20 by 15 or 12 by 15?
Yeah, it's about 12 by 20. It's DT&I based in Detroit.
Okay. And so how long will it, so now wherever this person is in the lower 48, somehow you'll have to deliver it to them.
Right.
And
so this one will take about 3 months to build, and for ones that are within a day's drive, I just put them in a budget truck. I understand how to pack them, and I just drive down and do that. For those that are further away, I put them in a pods container and just fly out and meet the truck at the other end.
So it'll only take you 3 months to build a 20 by 12 layout?
Now, keep in mind, the most popular option is mechanically complete with no scenery or structures, because that's what everybody hates: bench work and wiring, but they want the scenery and structures. So that's the reason it's going so quickly. Is I'm not. It's basically the skeleton. So they can, when they get it, they flip the on switch on the DCC system and everything's running, and they can go at their leisure and
Okay.
do speed.
That's a great approach.
Yeah, that's a really cool approach. I don't think we taught. Is that more recent, or has that been that way all along since you started?
It's been more, last 5 or 6 years, I'm seeing more and more of that. Now, some people don't even, talk about laziness, they don't even want to do the scenery contours. I should throw my clients under the bus like that. But I will do the scenery contours too in the foam, and then they can just add the textures on top of that. Or I'll just do scenery along one section so they can see it and copy it.
Okay, that's kind of cool. Then it's like
Yeah.
the hard part is done, or the boring part. For some people, that would be the boring part, and then away they go.
The other thing I've found too is, like with any job, if you do the same thing over and over every day, year in and year out, you become much faster. And I would say that I'm doing things maybe in a third the time that I used to. I mean, you get systems and approaches and ways of doing things. All the bench work is cut by a machine shop, so when it comes in, it's ready to kind of fall together.
Okay, so you hire a machine shop to cut all the bench work, and what do you use for bench work? What material?
I've gotten away from dimensional lumber in the last couple of years, and I just use 3/4 ply that the machine shop cuts into 1x3s.
Okay, and you find that's to be better than the dimensional lumber.
Yeah, it's heavier, which I don't like, but it's a lot more. You don't have all the wiggles in the wood that you would with dimensional lumber.
Yeah,
It's more stable. It's more stable.
Plus,
Plus, you can cut the wire run holes through it if I want. They'll mark the screw holes. So there's things, and this road bed is cut on ply too. That saves an enormous amount of time, because rather than sitting there on the basement floor cutting up 4x8 sheets of plywood, when he delivers it, you've got the track center line scribed in and it's just ready to go.
the track.
So are you sending them then like a CAD drawing that they punch into a CNC or something like that?
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. I use Third Planet software, which is wonderful.
Okay.
And with Third Planet, you can save it as a DXF file. So I just put it on a thumb drive, and the shop is only a couple miles away. I just drop the thumb drive off, and next week he brings it back.
Excellent.
Now, do you know what CAD stands for?
Is it computer aided or computer assisted design?
It's computer aided design, and Lex Parker taught me that. And then if you really want to throw people off the trail, it's also the symbol for the Canadian dollar.
I'm learning. I'm taking notes as we talk.
Yeah, boy. Yeah, I wouldn't do that, because there's a lot of what I say is not worthwhile to remember. I don't want to get too far away, Bruce. I don't want to get too far away from this book, Model Railroading is Art, because I don't think we should skim over that. Because
No, that
like there's lots and lots to talk about. But my original thought was I was very fascinated by this Model Railroading is Art, because I feel like it I don't know what's the word, authenticates what it is the hobby is.
Validates. That's the word you're looking for. It validates what we do.
Yeah, validates what we do. Yes,
That's an American word.
well, I like that. It does. It does validate it. I mean, I'm dying to ask you this question, and everybody's heard me ask it 1,000 times, but I'm going to ask it and get it out of the way. And before we carry on, I don't think I actually officially introduced you to Bruce, the mildly agitated mail boy, did I?
No, you did not. That was pretty rude of you.
Yes, it was. So this gentleman on my right here is Bruce, the mildly agitated mail boy.
Hi, Bruce.
good evening, sir.
And he's been with the AML network almost since its inception. I just say since its inception, because he's always been he was a friend of mine long since before. So he must have
Does he
had.
do this when you're at parties? Does he do this to you too, Bruce? Does he make you just sit there for? I'm looking at my counter here for 40 minutes before he introduces you to his friends.
Oh yeah, you get used to it though. You wander off and oh, you talking about me? Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, exactly. So I don't want to. So I'm going to ask this question because you must. I feel like you would have a definite insight into it. So since I started this podcast, and since the last time we talked to you, and I think you were like episode number 20 or something. You were well early on, and ever since that time, I think I've discovered that the hobby is way bigger than I ever realized. I've just met so many people and had so much interaction with so many people because of this podcast. And it seems to me this hobby is way more vibrant than anybody realizes. Have you ever gotten that sense, or what sense do you get about the hobby in those terms?
No, I agree with you. I have to laugh. I mean, what are the great conspiracy theories on all the forums that the hobby's dying? There's no young people in the hobby. The NMRA is out to get us. I mean, there's the MR is out to get us. But the thing about the hobby dying and no youth is, I just don't see it. Because of my website and people that contact me, at least a third, I would say at least a third of the people I correspond with are 30 or younger.
Wow.
And I mean, and the thing about the young modelers is, I mean, they bring in the enthusiasm and they're not tied to old ways of doing things. So I agree with you. I mean, it's as vibrant as ever, and the young people are coming into it. And my feeling on that is I think there's just something about how individual people are wired. I think sometimes just it's in our DNA or when we're born to be fascinated by things in miniature. And if it's in our DNA, that's never going to go away. So I just don't see the hobby dying out.
Yeah, miniatures are part of it, and also we did an interview with Blaine Hatfield there a little bit ago, and when I was talking to him, I thought to myself, I said out loud, I don't think people that are model railroaders are leave it or don't become interested in it because of video games. I think those are two separate things altogether, and if you're going to be a model railroader, you're going to be a model railroader.
I agree with you.
I think the key is discovering it, and I think what social media is doing is making it easier for younger people to discover it, and I think we're going to have a whole different breed of cat in 20 years. People the biggest knock for, or the biggest difficulty for young people up until recently was that if they went to a club or anything, they weren't given the credibility, or they weren't given a chance to mingle as much as, and now they can find each other and they don't need the grown-ups anymore.
No, they don't. And the thing that I found with young people is what motivates them is high quality modeling. So when you talk to them, the last thing you want to do is say you're young and dumb it down. I mean, they really are very driven, and at a very young age, the quality of their work is just astounding. So the hobby has a bright future. I'm not worried about that.
Cool. Very cool. All right. I want to ask you some very good questions about model railroading as an art. So you're going to have to help me out here because I don't have the book in front of me. I'm fascinated by the title of the book. I'm fascinated by the fact that you've already previously written 7 books. Do you have any idea of, like, as one of the previous books, which was the best seller up until of the previous books? Which book sold the most?
It was how to design a switching layout. The design book was the biggest seller.
Oh yeah, and do you have any idea of how many copies it sold?
3,000? Not a lot.
No, but it's not necessarily a lot, but it's a substantial number. Like no matter how you cut it out, it's a substantial number.
The new one is going to blow all those away. It's gotten whenever you write, there is no way to predict how something's going to be received, but it seems to have hit a chord and gotten a pretty quick launch. So we'll see how it goes. The nice thing about model railroad books is, unlike a novel where all the sales are in the first year or two, how-to books kind of stand the test of time. The Kalmbach Frary's book on scenery and Armstrong's on design, I mean, they had a 50-year run, so it's a little bit different. They have a longer lifespan, I think.
Yeah, they'll always be there because the hobby itself doesn't change. The the basic premise of the hobby doesn't change, or the basic guts of the hobby doesn't change. Maybe from a technical standpoint, but it's always been the same thing. You're trying to create a world in miniature. So tell me something about this book that I don't know to ask. Can you figure something out to tell me?
Well, I think that you gave me you just laid it out for me on a silver platter, Lionel. Because basically what people want with most model railroads is they want to be transported. They see something out in the field, or they see something in a prototype that grabs them. In one way or another, it gives them some form of positive feeling. And what we're trying to do is replicate that. We want to be moved, or when we walk into our layout room, we want to recreate that feeling. And the purpose of the book is to try to break it down for people, because it's not that easy. If you don't have a systematic approach, you're not going to get there. And I think one of the biggest fallacies, and I'm a prototype modeler, I mean, I'm a rivet counter as much as anybody else, but I think where people get really off track is associating prototypical accuracy with something that's going to transport you to that feeling. And you can have every bolt, every rivet in the right place and look at your layout, and it's not going to get you where you want to go if you don't understand what the driving elements are. And it's not the prototypical accuracy, it's what I mentioned before. It's how you compose it, and how you handle the color, and how you handle the backdrop. And particularly with scene composition, a lot of people have been waiting their whole life for a model railroad. They're excited, and their biggest fear is that they're going to be bored. So they've got this backlog of all these ideas, all these kits they bought, and really not that much room. And so you're trying to take a sledgehammer and take all these ideas and concepts and pound them into a small amount of space. And then when you look at it, you're going to be disappointed because it doesn't look like the real thing. And if you can train yourself to do just a few things, a few scenes very, very well, like Mike Confalone, Tom Johnson, Paul Dokos are all master composers, then, once you can swallow that pill and understand that you don't need all that in there, then you will have that sense of being there. So spreading things out, knowing which items to pick, how to balance the scene out is the first step. And then the second is how you color it.
Yeah. Okay. So I was just listening actually to an interview I did with a fellow named Robert Frischella, and he lives in Boston, and he's an artist as well as an S-scale modeler. He's one of two. There's a fellow in Green Bay, Wisconsin that's also an S-scale, I believe. But I talked to him about doing his art, beautiful renditions of a lot of D&H stuff, and he says the sketching of it is the hardest, filling in the colors the easiest. And it sounds like you kind of said the same thing. It's composing the scene, and putting the color in is kind of the last thing you do.
Right. And I think with color, and this is something, I have an internet friend out in the Midwest, which would, by the way, would make an excellent guest for your show, named Gary Christensen.
Okay.
Who is probably the master in terms of weathering. All those guys out there in the St. Louis area are incredible. And in studying Gary's work, and he was nice enough to help me out. As beginning modelers, we tend to look at color in terms of a monotone paint by numbers approach. In other words, you get a kit and it says paint the roof gray and the sides beige and the trim boxcar red, and you do that. And unfortunately, in the real world, it's not that easy. I mean, you're looking at dozens and dozens of colors very close to each other on the spectrum that blend together in complex patterns. And it takes a lot of time and practice to get better at it. But if you stick with it, the results can be impressive. I mean, if you look at Gary Christensen's work, I think he's on the Rust Bucket is where he hangs out, the Weathering Shop Forum, and then he's got a Facebook page. But if you just look at his stuff and some of his friends, I mean, Butch Eiler, for example, it's just astounding. And they take this very sophisticated layer approach. I mean, they work layer upon layer upon layer.
Okay. And
the bad news is it takes a while to to get that to even approach what they do.
But that's part of the new world of model railroading. That, like, the weathering of cars has become a hobby almost in itself. And the fact,
As it should be, I think.
yeah, and the fact that it may take them a while is really part of the enjoyment.
And that's one thing that always kind of rubbed me the wrong way is you don't hear so much of it now, but they would say, well, he doesn't have a layout. You know, you can't be a member of the clique or whatever. And I think that's total nonsense. I mean, however you enjoy that, whatever gives you enjoyment is how you get enjoyment. And these guys are master artists that have made a huge contribution to what we do.
I had this thought the other day. I was talking. We have a fellow on our show called Shane, the Young Gun Mason, and I met him when he was 20 or 19, and he's been part of the show for the last 2.5 years. And he's into DCC, and he's into all the things he can make locomotives do, and he does installs, and he's very much wanting to build a good size layout. But he's just moved into an apartment, and he's going to build like a down one wall of a bedroom. Like a 2 foot or 1.5 foot, but he's an N scale, a 2 foot by 12 foot layout, let's say, for argument's sake. And I said to him, we were talking, and I said, I think one of the things that has really changed is before it was that if you wanted to have people to mingle with, if you wanted to have people to socialize with, and you were the guy that was going to have a layout and have operating sessions, it seemed like the only way to do it was have something of reasonable size where you can have 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 people over. But now, as I said to him, I said he can build his 2 foot by 12 foot layout with these fantastic locomotives that do all kinds of things. And because he was putting a DCC receiver in an articulated car carrier, an Atlas, and it was going to make sounds. And I was saying to him, the difference now is that he can have this 2 foot by 12 foot layout. Okay, it's not necessarily going to take 7 guys to operate it, maybe him and his buddy. But then if he wants to have people to mingle with, he can just go onto the computer and find all these groups and forums and show people what he's done. And it becomes so much easier to enjoy the hobby with other people that you don't need a gigantic layout anymore.
I agree with you. And I think I've seen a shift with, some of the issues with Yahoo and their groups towards Facebook. So there's a lot, just in the last 1.5 years, I've seen a lot of groups come up on Facebook, and that's kind of taken off like fire. So that just, I agree with you.
Yeah. I don't know if you've ever heard me say this, but I'm convinced that what's going to happen is the hobby's going to explode because of social media, and we're all going to be covered in model railroad goo. I don't know what color the goo is because we haven't seen it explode yet, but we're all going to be covered in this slimy.
It's going to be CSX gray and blue.
There you go. It'll be. I love that. All right. So now I want to. Man, there's a ton of stuff here on your website. We should tell everybody what your website is called. Shelflayouts.com.
That's it. Thanks for the plug. Shelflayouts.com.
Well, you're going to get lots of plugs. And I see that you advertise. I see that you do the banner ad on Model Railroad Hobbyist. I do that too. That's the only advertising I do for the podcast. Do you feel like you get many hits from that?
I've gotten some traffic from that. Yep, and I also do Model Railroader. Do the ads in Model Railroader magazine. But you have to do everything. I do the newsletter. I'll put a plug in for that. If you go to the shelflayouts.com, I have a free newsletter every month where I give modeling tips. So that's
all right.
That's been helpful too.
Let me see if I can figure out where that is. Okay, I see home. I'm going to go home. All right, I'll go to the home page. And how do I find the newsletter?
It should be on the front page, the top or bottom, there should be something that says subscribe.
All right, let me see.
It better be there.
I don't think I see it, but I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer. So let's, Bruce.
I'll tell you this. I just looked at that, and I think you will be the 1,000th subscriber if you buy now, and don't hesitate. You will be the 1,000th subscriber, and you will also get I'll throw in a set of knives.
All right, Bruce, find it for me. I want to be the 1,000th subscriber.
I'm looking.
I found it. I found it. I hit the subscribe button. Now I got to put in my email address. I'm doing that right now.
What page did you find it on?
Well, it's if you go to the page and you go
the homepage.
The homepage. It's above custom model railroads. So you got.
Well, I'm on the other website. That's why.
Is there another website?
I'm on lancemindheim.com.
Well, there's two websites. Oh, come on, Lance. That's not fair. Okay, I'm typing now. This is one of what people find to be one of the most fascinating parts of the podcast is when I'm typing. They love that part because then they can hear me trying to type, and it's very tedious because I don't type very fast because I wasn't one of those smart guys back in the 60s that went, there's all girls in the typing class. Subscribe to list. Here I go. Boom.
I loved high school typing class.
Yeah. Thanks for telling me.
There was only 3 guys in that class.
Yeah, thanks for telling me now. All right, your subscription to our list has been confirmed. Thank you.
You are number 1,000, my friend.
All right, that is very cool. That is very, very cool. That is cool. Do you have the ability to take a screenshot where it says I'm the thousandth subscriber?
You Daffy Duck.
Yeah. Because
you're becoming a very high maintenance.
I am, but I'm going to put that on the Modeler's Life Facebook page and say, look what I did. Look what I did. That would be...
it'll show 1,000, but it won't show your name there. So it can be anybody.
Well, they'll have to trust me. They've been with.
I will go in there and say I will get the screenshot.
All right, so you're at shelflayouts.com, but aren't they both the same? I'm going to try. Let me.
No, the other website's totally different.
It is.
Is it really?
Yeah.
It is.
Because the business site is where I have to be polished and polite and professional, and the personal site is I can do whatever the heck I want.
Oh, crap. All right. Okay. LanceMindheim.com, news, contacts, model railroads, blog, how-to, bookstore. Then you go to the other one, and it's, let's see. You go to the other one. Yes, no, I'm not a robot, blah, blah, blah. Now, let me see. Let me open that up again. All right, there I am, shelflayouts.com. All right, well, yeah, it seems I'm going to go to the photo gallery. Oh, man, there's a ton of stuff over here, too.
There's tons of stuff everywhere.
Oh, come on, Lance.
Most of the best photos are on my Flickr page. If you go to Flickr and put my name in there, my better images are there.
All right. And I was somewhere where I saw what Lance is going to be on the road. Let's see, news. Oh, here, news. Like events I'll be attending and presenting clinics at. Railway Modelers Meet in Vancouver, BC. How did you end up being going out there? Did they requested your presence? I'm assuming.
They requested my presence. Yep.
And is that an RPM meet or something in Vancouver?
Yeah, they've got some good modelers up there. I'm looking forward to going.
Yeah, and have you been there before? Or?
I've been to Vancouver before, but not to this group. Okay. Renee Gorley, Mark Dance is an excellent modeler. So those are the two that I know.
I'm going to get a list of people that you think are excellent modelers for me to track down and have on this podcast.
This guy Lionel Strang's pretty good.
Yeah.
You'd like to.
He's a flash from the past. That guy. What do you think of these RPM meets? Like since the last time we talked, they were already established. I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago. I think it was like 3 years ago we talked, and they were already established, of course. But I think in the last 5 years, maybe even, they've really started to accelerate. Like they seem to represent where the hobby's going.
Yeah, I really enjoy attending them, although it's not politically correct to say this. I think at some point they're going to have to tighten up their belts in terms of how they run these things, or they're going to start losing people. And that the way that they're set up now, essentially they'll ask somebody to come speak, and they will let them talk about whatever they want. And you don't get a cohesive theme by doing that. And so you can go to one of these meets, and a lot of these clinics will be so specific that they don't really they would apply to very few people. For example, bolt patterns of Canadian Pacific gondolas in the 1850s. If you model the Canadian Pacific in the 1850s, so you get a lot of that type of stuff. The two that I'm going to were very specific, Chattanooga and Vancouver, They did not give me I mean, they said, this is what we want you to talk about, which I think is the better way to run these seminars. I don't think you should be giving that's necessarily giving all the speakers carte blanche, or you're going to start losing attendance. I think is going to start tapering off.
Okay. Uh, okay. Going along with that theme of RPM meets, I think the way they were started, because the name stands for Railroad Prototype Modelers, or yeah, I think it's Railroad Prototype Modelers. What do you think about the level of detail and that the ready to run models are coming out with? It almost seems to me like they're reaching a saturation point of, like, where do they go to next, kind of thing. It's like it's hard to imagine that they continue to expand on the.
Well, I think it's been first of all, I think it's been fantastic that they've done it. There is a controversy in terms of, well, that it discourages scratch building. But to answer your question, what I would like to see them do is take that same level of quality and move it to other areas, specifically structures would be one. And I'd like to see more of a move. I'm going to get shot for saying this, but I would like to see more trickle down into N scale in terms of the quality that you see in HO. I would like to see that trickle into N scale, and I'd like to see that quality go to structures. So it may be saturated in the locomotive and the freight car area, but there's still a lot of other areas that could be brought up to that standard.
And what do you feel about? Are we losing? Like, I didn't mind assembling freight cars, but of course there wasn't that many pieces to put together. But I didn't mind having undecorated freight cars and painting them and decaling them or decaling them for my own particular railroad. And have we lost some of that? Like, has that become not of that much interest anymore?
No, I think that for those that still for those that enjoy that aspect of it, you can still do it. But what you run into is, let's say that you need 50 coal hoppers, and the thought of the first one or two are going to be fun, but by the time you get to 4 or 5, the novelty wears off. So by having the ready to roll,
yeah,
that you can get, it allows you to get a higher quality fleet up and going quickly. So
yeah,
I think it adds to the hobby, not takes away from it. I don't think the guys that still want to do the stuff on their own, there's nobody telling them you still can't do that.
Right. And I guess, and as you described earlier, you deliver a lot of layouts where the bench work and the wiring and the track is installed. So, I mean, as soon as you get there and you leave and start heading home, the guy's probably loading it all up with all his locomotives and cars and running the
Sometimes while I'm building, sometimes it's not even assembled yet, and he's loading the cars.
That's a really slick way to do it, because, I mean, half the fun, having a layout, whether complete scenic with structures and everything, is important to the hobby for sure. But I mean, half the fun is running your trains and getting.
I agree with you.
Yeah, so I mean, that's interesting. So,
can I interrupt you for a second? Can I be a rude guest?
Hang on, let me check. Yep. Okay, go ahead.
No, you just spurred a thought about the book, that point I wanted to make. And when you said half the fun is running it, the one point I wanted to make in the book too is, and I agree with you, but if in fact a model railroad is viewed as art, and you hit your target, an enormous amount of enjoyment can be obtained just by looking at what you built, whether the trains are running or not. And I remember I was somewhere and they were talking about some modeler that had a lot of dioramas, and they were kind of disparaging them because there were no trains, which I thought was really unfair. I agree with you that that's half the fun, but you should not, there's nothing wrong with just looking at what you've created, because the whole purpose is to be transported. And when you're out rail fanning, 99% of the time you're waiting on a train, there is none there. You're just kind of bathing in the atmosphere. So if you execute your scene correctly, You can just go in there with a cold beer and feel like you're transported to whatever time and place you've tried to model. So
Yeah,
anyway, that's my little tangent.
yeah, I think that's very
Uh,
important. I think that's really important.
Now that I've interrupted your mojo, I'll
No,
let
no,
you get back to the regular
no.
scheduling.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly. No, I think that's really important. Like I enjoy, like we're gonna talk again because I enjoy this because I think what you're offering to the modeler and what you're offering to model railroaders in general is hope in that it's not just about running trains, it's not just about building structures, it's about the whole program. And I think that's why this hobby is just, well, now that we can find each other so easily when we're not hiding in each other's basements or wherever in attics, I think all these aspects, like you say, the guy, your friend, what was his name? The guy that weathers so well,
Oh, Gary Christensen.
Gary Christensen. I mean, his thing
Gary
is,
Christensen.
yeah, his thing is weathering freight cars, and I know of that weathering shop that you speak in that. I've wanted to try to interview those guys for a while because I think they do fantastic work. I mean, the whole hobby is just one avenue after another of the electronics that some people are into and what they can get engine locomotives to do with lighting and DCC now is fantastic. There's so much that you can do with the hobby. What's the most what was the most what's the most memorable layout you've been contracted to build?
Um, this was for an individual that was very private in terms of keeping to himself, but it was the Northeast corridor between Trenton, New Jersey, and Newark, New Jersey. Um, that's an instance where you can take a theme that you don't know anything about and make a prejudgment that you're not interested. And as soon as you start understanding it, you quickly become fascinated by it. But the Northeast corridor with with the 4 tracks under wire, we didn't model the actual wire, um, but it was fascinating. There's a lot more to it than you would realize.
Yeah, exactly. And how big was that layout?
40 by 12. It's pretty long.
40
40
by
feet long. Yeah,
wow.
40 feet long by 12 wide. It was just a loop.
And how long did it take you to build that?
2 years.
Two.
That one has fully scenic, scratch built structures, everything. Scratch built catenary, everything.
So you did the whole thing from start to finish?
Uh-huh.
Wow. And was it like within a day's drive of where you live?
Yeah, it's only 3.5 hours. It was up in New Jersey.
So have you ever kind of do you keep records like of like a layout like that? Did you keep some sort of records of building it or photograph it along the way or?
Right. When I build a layout for somebody, every Monday I send them progress photos, so it's all documented.
And some of these layouts would be stories in their own.
Except some people are very, very private. They do not. They just like to have their thing in their world. They don't want anybody to know about it. They want people coming over. They just want their deal. I mean, that's some people are social and some are private.
Well, for
So
sure, absolutely, and you have to respect the customer. Absolutely. I mean, how do you think people? Is it mostly word of mouth that people find you?
I would say that it has become more and more of that lately. Um, then the print ads also. But yeah, I would say word of mouth and print ads.
Print ads mostly, not so much the internet ads, but more of the print ads, eh?
I believe so. That's correct.
Oh, okay, cool. And
But
that's
I think the type of ad varies from product to product in terms of where you're going to get your customers. So you have to be an ad strategy that would work, say, for rolling stock might not work as well for what I do. So it's kind of a trial and error process.
well, that's for sure. And man, oh man, here's one here that you've built. I'm just looking at it. Let me see what I think it said something, and now I got to figure out how to get back there. It's fascinating that you've made a living doing this. Fascinating. And you've been a model railroader all your life. Started out the same way as everybody else under the tree.
Yeah, and I will say this: until I was a pretty bad model builder, and I would say I was pretty bad up until my 30s.
Okay.
Um, and you just got to stick with it and talk to your mentors. I mean, it's a hobby where you ask people how you do things, and they will tell you if you listen to them, you'll gradually get better.
Yeah. Okay. I'm looking at. So, what is your layout now? Is the downtown spur mostly?
And I've got the Los Angeles Junction, which was in Great Model Railroads this year. That was more of an art piece. It's very simple. It's just something I like looking at.
Yeah, that was a spectacular layout. I've seen the article. I'm just looking at the some of the photos of it here. It's that's a beautiful layout.
Thank you.
HO scale.
Mm-hmm.
What size?
10. It's an L, maybe 10 by 4 by 18 inches wide.
And where does Lance Mindheim keep his layouts that are his own personal? Do you have a layout room in your house?
I have in the basement, like everybody else, is the main layout. And as they say, poop rolls downhill. Basement layouts are harder to maintain because no matter how finished the room is. And then upstairs, I have a 10 by 10 room, which I call it my layout gallery, where I've got the Los Angeles Junction layout.
Does your wife know you're doing this?
I don't know. I'm not married anymore.
Well, there you go.
She did know. She was very aware because she lived here. Yeah.
A couple of your other layouts. You got the
nice transition. Go ahead.
The Brooklyn terminal and the East Rail. Are those still in existence, or they've been decommissioned and sent to somebody else?
The Brooklyn terminal is the one I'm working on now. The downtown spur is not done. So I go back, depending on my mood, I'll go down to the downtown spur and work on that. Or in the layout gallery, I have the Brooklyn terminal. The East Rail I sold, but to my understanding, it still exists.
Do you find sometimes you just this would be a really good question for all model railroaders all around the world. And we are listened to all around the world. There is one guy in Australia, Martin Jenkins, that's kind of annoying, but we let him listen to it anyways. He's always telling me how hot it is where he lives. He lives in Brisbane, Australia, and he's always telling me how hot it is. So I'm thinking, well, then don't go there. So you must get, like, what do you do when it becomes like, I don't feel like working on model railroads right now?
Boy, that is a great question because that just hit me recently. And it doesn't happen that often. But I think it happens to me. I think it happens to all people. And I believe the answer to that question is to do a really simple project. Forget about forging ahead. I think layouts tend to stall when we have a lot of complicated projects ahead of us, so you want to try to minimize those. But just take something small and simple. I mean, something that you could do in your sleep, whether it's a tool shed or whatever, and just cut yourself some slack and just try to do something that is kind of mindless but does have a place on the layout. That's what I do. Okay. But I think also accept that it is normal, that it happens to all of us, and not get down on yourself.
Yeah, and I mean, in your case, I guess you can always go off and write books or do design. I mean, do you have? I'm sure you have some sort of a structure where you, like, if you have a layout that somebody's commissioned you to do, you got to keep moving on that. But you can always take a break and work on your books or work on something else, I guess, along the way, or design.
Right.
What's your favorite thing to do?
I would say it's becoming structures. I like putting the whole scene together. I really enjoyed the Los Angeles Junction layout. I want my layouts to be able to operate prototypically, and it would really bother me if I couldn't do it. But I would say primarily scene composition and structures is what I enjoy the most.
And photography, obviously.
I love the photographic aspect.
And what do you use? Do you have what kind of camera do you use?
This is going to surprise you. I have gone, to answer your question, I have a Canon. I am going more and more to cell phone cameras. They are amazing. I wrote an article on MRH about up close cell phone photography. That's just become, there's a whole new world opening up in front of us with these phones, and what you can do with them is get them into tighter spaces and at a more realistic, lower angle. To answer your question, I'm using the iPhone a lot more, and that's, I guess the Google phone is even better than that.
Yeah, so you're an iPhone guy and you're using that more and more. I know it's hard to put it down when you want to take photos. I mean, you can get such good photos, and I mean, I think I'm at iPhone 7 or 7S or something like that, and I mean, I think the next ones are even better than that. I try to upgrade every 2 years because the phones just get better and better and better.
That was something I touched on in the book that's unique to our hobby, in that if you go to an art museum, if you look at a picture of the Mona Lisa in a book, and you go to the museum, the experience is going to be similar. But the beauty of our hobby is that's not the case, because we come in, we take in the walls, the windows, the fascia, and we have this helicopter view, and we have this enormous opportunity to totally transform how we see our world through the lens and interpret it. The angles that we shoot it at, dropping the camera lower, tightening in the shot, the software that we have available. So it's really an amazing opportunity.
Yeah.
Now that's an interesting comment about your helicopter view. What is the, I guess, your thought on the ideal height for a layout? Because a lot of guys like looking down at it. Some like to be closer to eye level, that type of thing. Where do you fall into that?
Well, I like armpit level generally. The thing, if you get them too tall, it becomes a little bit difficult to work with. So
Right.
I would say whatever you're comfortable with, but I think subconsciously people are generally most comfortable if it's at armpit level.
Okay.
Okay, so if you were 5'8", what about if the person has long legs and a short torso? Is that one of the measurements?
Why would you ask me that question when I'm getting tired?
You're not getting tired of us. You're not getting.
No. I'm just going through all this. I'm just going through all these math computations.
It still ends up.
I'm going to stick with my armpit level.
I'm looking here now. You built the modern era BNSF 34 by 15. How long did it take you to build that layout?
I think 4 or 5 months. That guy was a BNSF engineer, so that was fun to work on.
Really?
Yeah.
And I know you can't tell us. on the podcast what it costs, because that wouldn't be fair to the person that's purchased. But 34 by 15, your garage isn't that big, so you'd have to build it in sections, I'm assuming.
Right. I build it in sections, and then you can just stack them off into the corner. If the customer is relatively close, I may run half of it up to them as I get that done. Build half of it and then take that up to them to clear up space.
And do you find that the people that hire you to build layouts, are they of any particular, like, you have is it they're busy? Is it they're afraid to do it? Is it they just want it done?
They just want it done. A lot of them are experienced modelers. They know what lies ahead of them, and part of it they don't want to do. So surprisingly, some of these guys are very good modelers in their own right, and they're just saying, okay, I'm 70 years old. I want to get to the fun stuff. I don't want to deal with the bench work and the wiring. I just want to get a quick launch and do the stuff that's fun for me.
Yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense. So okay, and primarily HO, I'm assuming you're building?
No, it's about 50-50 HO and M.
Oh, really? Okay. So from your perspective, then N is thriving quite well.
It's hard to say. I mean, that's not a good sample size. And these guys have plenty of room, but it's been very popular, at least in terms of what I see coming in.
Well, the thing of it is, too, that I say so often is the N scale runs so well now. I mean, I don't know how it survived, because in the 70s, about the only thing that ran well was an F unit running backwards at 100 miles an hour. And now, I mean, it's hard not to be drawn towards N scale because it runs so well and the detail's so spectacular.
Yeah, it's come a long way.
I mean, I thought it was dead, but it turns out it was just lost in the hobby. All right, I think we've taken enough of your time. Let's see, we've Oh man, we've been here.
I've got one question for him,
Well, go for it.
and this is because he is such an aficionado of the shelf layouts, the smaller shelf layouts, shall we say. Have you had any experience with the new proto throttle and running on a shelf layout with it?
I'm kind of heartbroken on that because I just got a email from Scott Thornton, who was going to give me a free loaner of that sucker, which I wanted in the worst way. But I've got an easy DCC system, which would require a little more jumping through hoops with JMRA than I wanted to do. This is a long answer to say no, but I had a chance to get one last week, and he said yes. If you have easy DCC, you're going to have to do more work. So I think I may get some of my layouts up on NCE, and then I'll get another crack at it. But
all right,
I've heard good things about it.
It's interesting. It's interesting that you got an email from him just recently, because you never know. Maybe somebody suggested that you would be the ideal person to have one.
So as soon as I'm going to get a secondary system NCE, and then I'm going to get back to Scott because I would like to check that out.
Would that be your go-to system, is NCE?
I don't think it matters. I mean, basically you have two wires going into the booster, and you turn the knob and the trains go. So I think they're all excellent systems. This new thing with Loke Sound I used for the first time, that was really nice. So the ones I'm most familiar with are NCE, ECDCC, and then the Loke Sound system. They're all excellent. I would not make a spreadsheet and spend 3 months analyzing the differences. It doesn't matter.
Hallelujah. You said the same thing that I've been saying to people for years and years. It's two wires to the track. Quit making it so complicated.
And if you don't like it, you move it back and you take those two wires and you loosen the screws and you put them in the new system, and you're up and going.
I know. I don't know why people make DCC so complicated. It's two wires to the track. What part of that don't they understand? You got to have individual blocks, but you had to have individual blocks with DC and rotary switches and all that stuff. So it's pretty it's very, very simple, and yet, they make it so freaking complicated, and there's no need for it to be complicated. So when you build a layout, this would be one of my last questions. So when you build a layout, is that one of the considerations? Is it up to the owner to say, okay, I'm going to run this layout with DC or with NCE, or I'm going to run this layout? Like, you don't care, but is it up to the layout owner to supply the power supplies and all that?
No, I do that. Occasionally they'll have a system that they're already familiar with that they'll ask me to use. Otherwise, I'll just go with NCE, just because, for no other reason than to standardize it. I had a customer in Atlanta that had already bought the Loke Sound system. I wish I could remember the specs. That was really nice.
Yeah, the new.
But I jump between the three. I like all of them: NCE, the Easy DCC, and the Loke Sound. I don't get hung up on it as much as other people, because it's like we were talking about, backwards, forwards, and the throttle is 99% of what I do, and they all have that. So they're all good systems.
Cool. Consulting. Oh, you do consulting as well. Maybe I could get you to consult on how to make a good podcast.
Maybe you could consult on how to being a good podcast guest.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, well, you've done a fine. You've done great. I've enjoyed it. This is exactly what I expected. I mean, you were. We should tell everybody. We'll tell everybody you were more than happy to be a guest. You were anxious to do it. We got it going, and here we are.
I will have a link on my next newsletter that you are the 1,000th subscriber to.
Perfect. I will love that. Hot diggity dog. That'd be awesome. And then when I get this done, you know what I'll do is I will send you both podcasts, and you can have them. You can either upload them directly to your website, or you can send a link to where they go, or whatever, and then we can go, and then people can listen to you to their heart's content.
There we go. I think they would get tired of it pretty quickly.
I think model railroaders. You know what? People are just happy to listen to you and hear what's going on.
Well, I appreciate you having me on. It was a privilege.
Well, it's been a lot of fun talking to you again.
Yeah, it is. And we'll do this again. We will do this. We need to do this on a regular basis. I mean, if you're, because it's interesting that you enjoy NCE. I know that Jim Scores guy who owns it. He's a good guy, and he'd appreciate hearing that.
I didn't even put two and two together. I'm sitting here looking at him on my screen. It's a good thing I said nice things about you, Jim.
He's not allowed to talk. Yeah, he's a mute. Okay, so all right, Bruce, can you give out the email address?
I can. Our email address, because we like to hear from our listeners what they think, what the ideas they might have. Our email address is modeler'slife. It's modelers with one L. modeler'slife@gmail.com.
And we have a website. If you go to our website, which is modelerslife.com, you'll find all kinds of links to how you can download it, pictures of the crew, all the most recent podcasts. There's a listing of those. There's all kinds of stuff on there. So you just go there and check it out. And we have a Facebook page, Modeler's Life. And we also have another Facebook page called Fans of a Modeler's Life. And there's about 200 or 300 members on there. So that's cool. So there's all kinds of stuff to do as far as the Modeler's Life podcast goes. Now, Lance, you have one last job that's very, very important.
Okay, lay it on me, baby.
At the appropriate moment, you have to say happy rails to you.
I can remember that.
All right, because when the appropriate moment arrives, it's critical that you do it at the appropriate moment. So it's happy rails to you. Are we done, Bruce? Have we covered everything?
I think we have. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else.
I don't think we've covered everything because I think Lance is a bottomless pit of information, an endless fountain of information, a continuous running fountain of information. One of the few people in North America and the lower 48, one of the few people in the world that makes a living in model railroading, building layouts for people.
Yeah.
I mean, he's no Jim Scores, but who is?
Well, I'll tell you, when I get his book in, which I just ordered, by the way, while we've been chatting.
I have so many systems I bought from Jim. I mean, that's why he's not working now. He's retiring and he's playing just on the income of all these NCE systems that I have been dumping into these layouts over the years.
There you go. So you ordered the book, did you, Bruce?
I did, sir. Yes. So I'm looking forward to getting that and taking a look at it.
And how much did the book cost?
$30.
Yeah, it was like 30 or about 41 Canadian.
Okay.
Being in Canada, it's a little more expensive, but yeah.
So is it $29.95? Is that the actual Amazon price?
US, yes.
$29.95. And you know why the price is so low, Lance?
Why is that?
Volume. All right. Well, Lance, as the sun slowly sets over the back 40, and we close the barn doors on another episode of A Modeler's Life, I guess there's nothing else left to do except for you to say,
happy rails to you.
While in Busted Knuckle, guests of A Modeler's Life podcast stay at the Casa del Sol Motor Court and Inn, where late-night dancing at the Rumba Room is a magical event to be experienced.
It's another Lincoln Homer.